fine. Well, hey man, it's great to meet you. Where are you located?
I'm in Manhattan, New York City.
Okay, good, good, good. Well, I'm in the
You're
middle.
in the Midwest?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
All right.
Yeah, cool. Well, man, it's great to meet you, and I'd love to begin our conversation before we get into your mission and your work by asking you 4 years ago when this pandemic was raging. I know New York was a different beast. It hit everyone in a different way. How did you make it through it, and how did it ultimately change the way that you do things now?
Oh, wow. How much time do we have? Uh, Going into the pandemic, I was had just been hired CEO of a startup. And at the same time, I had a couple of very lucrative freelance gigs as a digital copywriter. And literally on March 2nd, 2020, the rug got pulled out. The projects that I was working on as a copywriter were canceled, and the investors and the founders pulled out of the company that I'd been hired for. And primarily because we were importing industrial composting machines from China. And first, the 25% tariffs hit us, but then our chief target market that we were blowing up, we were getting leads like flooding in, um, was the food service industry. So orders were canceled, and because of the tariffs, there were orders that got left on the dock. And so it swept my feet out from under me, financially. And then at the same time, I have a son. My son has special needs. He's At the time he was 13, 12 or 13, just starting high school, and he has Down syndrome, and he was in a special needs school, and that all had to come in-house. So suddenly you're homeschooling, you're remote schooling, as they called it. I wasn't really homeschooling. A lot of gifts in that period. He responded very well to doing all of his classwork over the iPad, which many kids didn't. But it was a full-time gig there. And during that first year of the pandemic, I saw that my clock was ticking forward. And I just needed to like do some juggling and do some reinvention as I had done in the past in various moments in my life, and come up with something that would be age proof and economy proof for that. And so I had been practicing mindfulness and meditation for many years. I had also been sober for many years, where I used that kind of work as part of my recovery. And I'd been an entrepreneur most of my adult life. So over the next couple of years, I crafted this 4-month intensive program that I now teach and I give, called Mental Fitness for Business Leaders in Recovery. So that's how I got today, and how the pandemic kind of launched it.
It's interesting. My son was the same age and he's on the spectrum. He has a long arm on his 15th chromosome. And
Hmm.
before we went into that, excuse me, I kept thinking I was in denial. Someone told me in January that they thought that they were going to send devices home to kids. And I just dismissed it. I was in such shock that that would even happen that it just went in one ear and went out the other. I just let it go. But I remember thinking my son loved two things the most at that point: Major League Baseball and school. And when those both shut down, it was like you just had to figure it out. So, yeah, it was a wild time, especially for those kids that socialize so well. And I know every
Hmm.
Downs kid that I've been around in the special needs community has an extra level of gregariousness that goes into who they are. They seem like there's a level of sociability that has to happen for them to feel like they're balanced on this planet.
Right, right. No, it's very true. My son probably has a little less of that than some other kids with Downs. But he still needs it. He still
Yeah,
needed it, and it affected him profound. Just like typical children were affected profoundly by the lack of socialization.
yeah,
Not knowing how to greet children, now not knowing how to invite others to play,
yeah.
even as teenagers. I heard all kinds of stories from family therapists about just asking a girl out or a guy out on a date.
Yeah.
You know, just it wasn't there. It was all social media contacts. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So now that the dust is kind of settled with this pandemic, we're in 2024. If I put you in front of a bunch of third grade students at career day and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I would say I'm a mental fitness coach,
Okay.
which they would say, "What is that?" And I would describe it like going to the gym. I'd say, how many parents of your parents go to the gym regularly? And they maybe does somebody have a trainer that they work with? And somebody's hand would go up, and I'd say, well, I'm like that trainer, but not in the gym. I'm working with someone's mind.
Yeah.
And the example I give is that when you go to the gym, the trainer will likely, if you've never been before, he'll give you light weights, have you do a few reps, hopefully make it fun for you so you want to come back, and that you build muscle mass slowly over time, but doing it really consistently. And by the same token, I take people through mental fitness exercises in where they don't have to start out sitting in the lotus position for 20 minutes and become the Buddha.
Yeah.
Um, we're first showing them how their mind is reactive negatively to things. We actually have an online assessment to show them exactly what the profile of their negativity is. And then we help them through these exercises move from a negative reactive mindset over to a positive responsive mindset. And I can describe that difference in a little bit.
Sure. So how did we get to this point? Take me back to where you were born and raised. I know you've done consultancy work. So how did you evolve to this place where you're helping the minds of these business leaders?
Ah, wow. Okay, I'll try to cliff note it. So I'm from the Midwest originally. I'm from northern Indiana on Lake Michigan, a little
Okay.
town called Michigan City, Indiana, an idyllic little community next to it called Long Beach, Indiana. And I was back there last summer. It did not disappoint for its idyllicness. In the mid 60s, my father had the largest bankruptcy in the history of the state of Indiana. He was a land developer in that region, and he moved the entire family to inner city San Juan, Puerto Rico. And that's a novel in and of itself. And we lived there for about 4 years when I was a small boy, and I went to a Spanish speaking grade school. And then we moved back to Florida and whatnot. And I lay all that out by saying I had a chaotic childhood. It's not unusual, but that's sort of the tip of the iceberg of that chaos. Alcohol reigned supreme in my family and in my clan at large and in my culture that I was raised in. Um, and it was my coping mechanism. We moved from Puerto Rico to Florida, and from Florida I went to drama school, and that was a bacchanalian environment, if you will. But in drama school, it was is a very prestigious conservatory program. Many of the tools and techniques they give actors to ground themselves in have to do with mindfulness.
Mhm.
So they teach you meditation practices and mindful movement and breathing techniques and yoga. I had tons of that for 4 years. They didn't call it yoga though. Back in that day, they didn't want to offend families' religious sensibilities, so it was called dynamics. Um, and so, and I only learned that years later. But that's where my drinking really got a firm foothold on me as a coping mechanism. I came to New York. I pursued a career as an actor. My day job was in investment banks and law firms right when they were creating these brand new things called IBM PCs. The first one that I got in an office had two 8-inch floppy disks,
Yeah.
that it used. And it was like, fire. It was like we all gathered around it to look at this newfangled thing.
Yeah.
And so within the next 3 to 4 years, I had enough information. I was programming these things. I was a much sought after office temporary temp to do these things. I hung up my shingle as a consultant, and that was the first business I started. And as I described earlier, I'm from an entrepreneurial background. My father not only did the land developing, he did everything. He hunted sharks. He had a chicken franchise. He had, my friend of mine used to refer to him as Tucker, a man in his dream. If you remember
Yep.
the movie about, the early days of the auto industry. And um, so he just followed his bliss in very many directions. And so it was a way of life in our house. So filing a certificate of incorporation and setting up a shingle like that was kind of the done thing in my family.
Yeah.
And over the next few years, I got married and founded a company in Midtown Manhattan and became quite successful as a guru in a real niche area of software. But then right around the year 2000 or so, I realized I wasn't coping well.
Yeah.
And I was very reactive, very stress, get driven by my stress more than by my logic. I remember a banker once like talking me off the ledge. You're going to be okay. It's okay. And he called me to tell me I was a few dollars overdrawn. And I could solve it that day, but he could hear the stress in my voice. And at one point, at the behest of a dear, dear friend who was a Zen Buddhist priest, he encouraged me to go into therapy. And that therapy over time sort of unwound the alcoholic system I had been raised in. Uh, and at one point, after examining all of that, um, I was in a particular environment, a particular situation where I suddenly blurred out to an alcohol counselor. It wasn't my alcohol counselor, it was somebody else's. I said, I'm an alcoholic too. And they spun around in their chair and they looked at me and said, have you ever said that out loud before? I said, not like that, not like that. So somebody also that same day came to me that happened to be in somebody's rehab. Um, I was visiting them in their rehab, and somebody else came to me that day and said, if you leave this place and go back to New York, it was down in Florida, and then go back to New York, there's something called AA you can go to. And so my first meeting happened a few days after that. Um, uh, and I've been sober ever since. Now, I just want to say too, I'm not a spokesman for AA, and I've known lots of people who've gotten abstinent from alcohol without it. It has been something that has been valuable for me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, everybody has their own path that they're on.
Yeah.
Uh, so just want to squeeze it. So that got me into part of my recovery was heavy meditation.
Yeah.
Um, After a little while, I took some classes in meditation, and that teacher handed me up to their teacher, who I've been studying with for about 16 years now. And both of those teachers came to me at one point and said, it's time for you to start teaching.
Yeah.
So this all folded together into this practice I'm launching now. I've been launching for a couple of years.
So who's been a hero, a source of strength for you in your life?
Oh, wow. Wow. So many, so many. Many, many people in the recovery community have and are to this day. Um, you know, One of the things I sit and I ask people who are new to recovery when they come to me to talk, I ask them, who made you think your life was worth saving? And we'll often find a parent or a neighbor or a teacher or somebody who believed in them in a way nobody else did. And I'm going to choke up. For me, that was a gentleman by the name of Father Leo. When we lived in Puerto Rico, he was a gentleman who pitched in and helped my parents in immeasurable ways. And one of them was picking me and my siblings up from school every single day for 4 years and intervening on my behalf where the teachers literally walked out to the car to choke me by the throat in front of him. And he would intervene on my behalf at that time. And he was a rock in my life. He was very much like an extra parent. He was also, a beloved uncle to me all of my life. We had a very special relationship. But when I finally pursued recovery, he's the voice that echoed loudest in my head.
Yeah,
Uh, so
that's wonderful. So let me ask you right now, if you could meet one person alive on the planet that you find inspirational or fascinating, who would that be?
for me, one of the go-tos that I am always inspired by is Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah,
His clarity and his language. Um, when you both, I have several of his audiobooks being read by him, and you can hear the inner peace flowing out in his voice. Uh, when you watch him on YouTube, so I've recently been taking an online course with him where he has live sessions, and it's simply his presence, his articulation, his humanity. He's one of the most effective teachers. He's usually the go-to I start people with. This is your initial reading, and get familiar with this person. But then in his ilk, there are just so many others. Thich Nhat Hanh, who just passed away, was one. And then I have my own private people who inspire me, and they go by first names only, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, um, yes.
So let me ask you this. You obviously have to give a lot of yourself to help people get to a better place in their lives, but you also have to hold back to take care of yourself, your son, everything in your life. How do you balance that out? What's the ultimate motivation every day for you to wake up to do the collective work that you need to get done to evolve as a human?
It's really all about present moment awareness.
Yeah,
And, the old adage you've heard, one day at a time. Everything I need to do, I only need to accomplish within this day. So there can be all kinds of things with deadlines and timelines out into the future, but a footstep towards them can only happen today. And that's all I focus on. And yes, there is a lot of support that I give out, and there's a lot of support that I receive throughout the day. But in each one of those calls, those conversations, I'm present in that conversation so that when I hang up that phone, I'm present for my son.
yeah.
Um, and that's it. It's all about, now people talk about work-life balance. And work-life balance is simply when you can be in each of those worlds and focus on them. And for many, many people, it's not about adjusting what the job is or coming to an agreement with the family. It's about allowing themselves to be present in that moment. So when you're going to the soccer match with your family, hang up the phone. Nothing, how much, yes, doctors, I realize people do have emergency calls, but learn how to filter those and whatnot. But if you can, you do not have to be trying to close the deal from the soccer sidelines,
Yeah.
and at the same token, the number of people sitting at a desk right now who are worried about getting their child into college when they've got their kindergarten application in front of them, that is not keeping it in the day.
Yeah.
They're sitting at work worrying about a future thing in their family. If you can keep your focus on the moment and where you are. And those are the exercises that I train in.
So raising a special needs son, what has that done for the way that you view the world and the way that you live your life and do your business? How has that affected the way that you wake up to the world every day?
Oh, Joe, these are brilliant questions. Um, Again, it comes down to presentness. So when my son was born, again, I'll choke up. We knew 20 weeks in utero
Yeah,
uh, through everything except an amnio. Every other test was saying this points to Down syndrome. So when he was born, and I was,
I get it. I
thank you. I can only
I,
imagine you do.
I 100% do. Yeah.
So he was all swaddled up and in his incubator, and they kept asking me, "You can hold him, you can hold him." And I said, I had no, I was very experienced with children. I'm one of 8 children. I had 17 nieces and nephews. I was the go-to babysitter in the family as the bachelor for
Yeah.
years. I had no qualms picking up this child. But as he lay there in the incubator, I didn't want to pick him up right away to reinforce his independence from me. And that my goal from that moment forward was to give him the best possible quality of independent life he could get.
Wow.
And so we work on his independent living skills and things like that. So what um, I don't get trapped in. I don't get trapped in future tripping about him. What college will he get into? What career will he have? How are his grades? I've never cared about his grades. I care what the daily conversations I have with the teachers about how his skills are developing, how he socialized that day, what funny thing he did, his problem solving. And I'm more concerned about that. And I turned to very close friends.
You're, I think you went on mute, maybe. There we go.
Better?
Yeah, it's back on. Yeah, it just went mute. Yeah.
Okay. Going in the garbage next.
Uh-oh.
Um, I lived its useful life.
Yes.
Uh, so where was I? So I was saying that I worry more about his daily growth and daily
Yeah.
skills building, and I worry about grades.
Yeah.
And um, friends of mine who have children about the same age and who admittedly are future tripping about what college their kid will get into, what their future life will look like, and whatnot. I say, take a deep breath, and if you want to, we'll switch kids for a day.
Yeah.
And you'll recognize just what and many of my friends and parents have come to me and said, I've taken this from you as an example, to focus how they're growing today,
Yeah.
not to, and the only worry we have for them is happiness.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, is it possible my son Adam will have a career? I think he very well could. He's a
Yeah.
very high functioning kid. Will he have a relationship? I very well think he could. He has that kind of sociability. He could easily be married one day.
Yeah.
And my only concern about any of that is he does it happily.
Yeah.
It's something that gets him out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And his mother and I don't have really we don't know whether it's going to be creative or whether it's going to be, even a manufacturing job. It could be any number of things because we see him having a broad range of interests. But one of the things when many of my friends call and say, "Hey, can I get your feedback on something?" And it's of a parenting nature, I always start by saying, "Look, I'm going to preface this by saying the gift of having a special needs child is the access to experts I get that anybody would want access to.
Right.
So I'm largely going to be quoting them."
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask you this, of all of these things that you've accomplished in your life up to this point, what are you the proudest of?
Yes, I just had this conversation late yesterday. But the two things are my sobriety and my son,
Yeah.
hands down. I've had other, graduating from a prestigious conservatory program was a proud moment. Owning my company was a proud moment. But today, if I needed to write my epitaph, it would be on those things. He died sober as a good dad.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow. I think I'm a challenged person who lives with intention. and the intention to improve, the intention to love, the intention to be. I live in those intentions every day.
So if anyone out there wants to reach out, they want to hire you, learn more about what you're doing, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Well, two places. I think I might have provided you with a link to something called the Saboteur Assessment. I'm not sure if I did.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then, so if anybody's interested in working with me, I invite you to take this 3-minute quiz that helps frame how your negativity, what your negativity profile is. And they call it the Saboteur Assessment. Send me those results and I will send you back a link and we'll set up a time to have like a sample coaching session. But working with me is not an impulse purchase. It's something that starts with a conversation and we start building a relationship there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I invite anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn at my name, Ray Schaub. You'll find me there. And my company's name is Consa Mental Fitness. So.
Excellent. Ray, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you opening up. It's always a joy to connect with parents that are so involved with their children. I've been very involved with Miles and the special needs community, and it's always good to hear other perspectives. And I think that's kind of one of the backbones of doing podcasting is that I think it's one of the best modern versions of therapy that we can go through, and we all don't feel so alone. And I feel like we're much more connected and going towards the same things, as opposed to what the media says about us in this politically divided world we live in.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this has been a delightful conversation, Joe. I know we had a couple stutter stops there, but in getting on board here, and I'm just really glad we did.
Yeah, absolutely. I am too. Yeah. Keep doing the great work out there. I really appreciate it.
You too, Joe.
Yes, sir.
I mean that. Thank you.
Take care.